I put in front of all of you a little updated handout in regards to the Sidney mitigation projects that we've been working on for 13 years now. So as all of you know, the county has been supporting the village of Sidney throughout the mitigation of flooding impacts that they felt both in 2006 and 2011. After 2006, we acquired 9 properties in a flood buyout. We then worked with the village to do an Army Corps study to determine what really would benefit the village as far as mitigation strategies. There was a strategy about building a berm around the village, which was a no-go. There were a number of things that the village had looked at. And then in 2011, the flood hit again. And this time, we were really threatened with losing Amphenol, one of the largest employers in the county. Economic development worked very hard to retain them and keep them in Sidney, and was very successful in doing that. But as part of that, the village said we have to figure out a way to protect our community. So we embarked on a very long-term community recovery strategy project where we talked about doing what they basically are, remove people from the flooded areas to high ground. So we went on another flood buyout. As of today, we've acquired 132 properties in the village of Sidney, which is a lot of properties. We've worked with 2+4 Construction in the village to create 2 separate housing projects, one at Sherwood Landings, which was an LMI project, which is multifamily housing. And then the second, 2+4 Construction, purchased the Civic Center from the village of Sidney and put senior housing units on the top 2 floors and senior meals on the bottom floor. Both of those projects went 100% back on the tax rolls without a pilot in an effort to reduce the impact of the local tax base from all of the properties being acquired. And I'm giving you this background so you understand this has been a culmination of projects along the way. So as we've been doing the buyouts, the village has been working with River Street Planning and some engineers from O'Neill and Fuss to design an engineered mitigation. So in 2011, we saw 2 different types of floods. In Middletown, we saw a flood where it raged through in the morning, overnight. The next morning, we were in dry, and we were able to go in and evaluate destruction. Houses knocked off their foundations, buildings torn down. It was a disaster area, but the water was out of there. In Sidney, a week later, waters roared in out of Weir Creek, out of the Susquehanna, and it continued to roar in 2 days later, and then the water sat there for 9 days. Those houses absorbed all of that water. So you didn't see the mass destruction we saw in Middletown with houses off their foundations and destruction, but you literally had houses substantially damaged because it literally soaked the water right up to the ceiling timbers. When we tore those houses down, we actually found black mold in the attics with timbers still wet 12 years later because those houses literally acted like sponges. So the big issue for Sidney is with the Route 8 corridor where it is, and with the way the village sits and the railroad bed, it creates a bowl. So the engineers came up with this concept of building culverts under Route 8 that would allow the waters to actually flow out of the village, reconnecting the floodplain on the other side by the industrial park, and flow back into the river quicker so that the waters don't sit there for days on end, destroying more homes and infrastructure. We only see about 4 or 5 inches of actual flood reduction from this, but what we do see is waters removed quickly, and we see enough of a move of the flood fringe to take several homes out of the floodplain, reducing their flood insurance. But we also see a lot more homes go from having first floor flooding to basement flooding, which almost halves their flood insurance premiums. That makes the houses that remain viable for being reconstructed and for being able to purchase them, because in most of the homes we acquired, people were paying more in flood insurance premiums than they were on their mortgages, because flood insurance is so high, especially after the Biggert Waters Act took effect. So we wanted to do this project in order to make all that happen. So we're now at a point where the culverts have to be fabricated. They have to be created this year to be installed next summer. The village, however, has run into some financial difficulty, and there is a big balloon payment that has to be made in order to create the culverts. It is 100% funded by FEMA. There's actually no local dollars in this. FEMA is 100% funding it. But FEMA is a reimbursable program, so the money has to be upfronted, and the village doesn't have the money to upfront it. The IDA stepped in and tried to help, but for reasons that Glenn can explain to you, they weren't able to. And then Soil and Water has also agreed to step forward and help by doing construction management during the construction of this to make it work. So the piece we needed was the upfront funding. So Glenn and I met with the Finance Committee and we explained all of this. So the resolution before you today is about the county upfronting that as a shared service for the village of Sidney. My office will take over the administration of the FEMA grant. We will walk it through to make sure that the reimbursements take place. We will make sure that soil and water is paid for construction oversight. There's money in the grant for administration, construction oversight, so we can cover any interest that we lose on the $5 million that way. And we can then order the culverts and then get them constructed next year. The whole project will close out in December of 2025. Questions?
Yeah, I have. I know where they're replacing the Doug Road Bridge by me. They figure it'll be next year at the earliest because metal is so backed up. Is that going to affect the culvert and the FEMA?
Not in this case because there's actually no steel involved in this. This is precast concrete. So they actually are paying a company to precast them. They've already got the bid award out. They know what company they're using. They literally can't pay the bill. So we're looking at this as a shared service with one of our villages to help them out.
I have another question.
Sure.
Where the old part of the Amphenol plant is still being used, I understand they're going to move that and tear that plant down, or is there plans for that?
There are plans to reconstruct it. They're not moving. The plating facility is staying, and Glenn might be able to answer that better than myself because I know he's working with them. But my understanding from the site plan we looked at the planning board is that they're reconstructing that building and going to a cleaner plating process. Okay. So they are staying there. Amphenol's actually moving from that location.
Think they're moving to the new one.
Yeah, Glenn, do you know they're staying there, right? They're just building a new.
Yeah, the new plating facility is
going to be in the same area.
Sure. Any other questions?
Any questions?
Hey, Shelley, you're not an engineer, I know, but on this diagram, it shows the culverts. How, the fatter one, I understand, but then they got two skinny tributaries off the main one. What's that about? You know?
What I do know is that the 5 of them will go in series, and that allows the water to flow along Weir Creek so that they don't inundate the wetland and flood the industrial park. That's why it kind of fans out the way that it does. It almost creates like an alluvial fan all by itself. And they will only have water in them when it's flooding. Otherwise, they'll be completely dry. So the next phases of this, which you'll see in the handout, the village has been working with the Nature Conservancy in my office to try and come up with ways of creating recreational uses down there on the open space we've created. And those culverts they're 20 feet by 10. You'll actually be able to walk through them, to actually connect them to walking paths, to connect one side of the village to the other so people don't have to cross that 4 lane anymore.